Now it's time for the next session. The next speaker started her career as an instructional designer, and later she moved into the technical writing role. So she has the experience that spans more than 20 years with a broad portfolio under her hat. From user manuals to quick references cards, e-learning courses to instructor-led training, she's done it all. She still believes and abides by the principles she learned during her initial days and is here to share them with us. So let's welcome with a round applause Deepti Sawhney, who's going to show us how we can implement the instructional design principles into our documentation. And the fun fact is that she makes some scrumptious chocolates. So, waiting for that, Deepti. So, yeah, it's all over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anshita. And thank you for giving a very warm and a cordial introduction to me. Uh, can I share my screen now?
Yeah, yeah, please.
Thank you. Right here. And now I put my PPT in full screen. I hope my screen is visible to each of you.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, great. All right, so the session today is about using instructional design in technical writing. Hi, everybody. I'm Deepti Sawhney, and that's me at my uh, best professional look in an office, in my office environment, and on a work day. A little about myself and my career journey. I started my career with NIIT, the Knowledge Solutions Business is what it was called, or to a common man or a woman, or all of us, it would be e-learning. That is where I started my career, and that is where the awareness of the field called instructional design fell into our laps. Um, the journey moved on. There were a couple of pit stops at companies like TCS, Cadence, and Sapient. And now my current stop is at Synopsys. Um, so I'm not sure if I do see a lot of my work colleagues on the conference today. So thank you for staying back for my session. It certainly encourages me. Um, for the others, let me give you a brief about what we do at Synopsys. So, Synopsys is a company which is into electronic design, automation, software, and solutions, or in short, it's called EDA. And what this software and solutions does is it helps design engineers basically design and verify complex chips, or a system on chips is what we call them now, for so that they can be used in advanced processes or models. Okay, so the latest functionality that you see in your automobiles or on your phones is all uh, thanks to the chips that you have in your phones and in your automobiles. And on the hindsight, thank us because we are there contributing to effective use. Well, you can bash us up as well when there are design flaws. Nevertheless, that's my career journey. And this is my navigation system. So that's my family. We are the Sahnis. And apart from my family, the strength where I from where I draw my strength, actually, I enjoy reading, all kinds of books from fiction. Chetan Bhagat's, they are my favorites, and to non-fiction ones, whether it's Brené Brown or Robin Sharma, or these days it's Jay Shetty. So those are the kind of reading material that I love to do. And I enjoy listening to music, I'm sure, like most of you. And yes, I also happen to be a Toastmaster. Um, when I spoke with Anshita about the session and when I volunteered, I chose this topic called using instructional design in tech writing with an intention. My intention was to share how instruction, what I have learned as an instructional designer, or what I know in instructional design, if we could use that or some of its principles while we do technical writing, I think it will be really nice. So through the next 20, 25 minutes or 30 minutes that we have, I would like to share that intention with each of you. My humble attempt is to transfer or to bring out the knowledge that I have into practice, not only in my own work, but also share it with you so that you also can take upon that practice and turn it into a daily habit. So let's hope our intentions work in sync and we move on. So, what are the objectives for this session? The objectives are plain and simple. What is instructional design? Why is user analysis important in instructional design? And how to apply the user analysis to technical writing. So let's get started. Are there any instructional designers in the group? I would also like to see people. So let me bring it out. Right, raise your hand if you are familiar with what instructional designing is. Or you can use the chat window. Yes, Aviral, I'm talking about chips, but let's move back to instructional design. All right, no problems. So what do you think is instructional design? Awesome, Ranjit. You understand what instructional design is, so you're making my work easier. Okay, so for the rest of us, what do you think instructional design is? You don't have to give me a definition. You just have to share. You can share it in chat or feel free to unmute. In the simplest of forms, instructional design. Does science sound like rocket science, does it? No, it doesn't. Okay.
For e-learning,
Design, yes. E-learning. What in e-learning? So what do you do with instructional design in e-learning? Yeah, Mohit says designing instructions for learning. Well, that is precisely what it is. So at the very basic level, instructional design, if you break it up, it is about designing instruction. Yes, you design content for a learner. Yes, coming up, you guys are now getting charged. I'm glad to see that. So let's come back to what is instructional designing according to theory, according to books. Instructional design is a process of analyzing learner needs and using it to define effective instruction. Now, this is a heavyweight definition, but there are some pieces here which I'd like to bring your focus to, uh, or bring your attention to. And I'd also like to share here that instructional design, some people feel that it's science, some people feel it's a methodology, others debate it being just a simple approach. Um, in the context of this presentation, or in my view, it's a field of study. You understand instructional design principles. There's a lot to read about. And when you understand those principles, you see that there are models which apply those principles. And then you can use those models, bits and pieces of those models in everyday instruction. We'll see how we'll do something about it. For now, let's get back to this definition of instructional design being a process of analyzing learner needs and using it to design effective instruction. So what is important here is analyzing the learner needs and designing effective instruction. So when you talk about e-learning, e-learning is electronic learning. So when you're transferring learning or you're making a course and giving it through electronic media, that is e-learning. So there are different models or modes or systems in which you impart learning, right? Systems could be trainings, they could be school or classroom education, right? You have learners there. Systems could be professional or professional or technical trainings, and then you have soft skill trainings. Okay, so these are all different systems. Now, within each system, you're designing instruction, and if you intend to design it effectively, that is where instructional design comes in handy. I'll pause for a moment here to see if anybody has any questions. Or is there something about instructional design that you've not understood in the definition that I shared? Okay, no news is good news. I move on. Okay, so now that I wanted to bring your attention to analyzing learner needs, let me first ask you, who do you think is a learner? Or in the context of technical writing, who would be a learner? Learner, can we safely say learner could or could not be a user? Yes or no? A writer himself is a learner. Yes, absolutely. We are all lifelong learners. Right. So to keep it safe for understanding instructional design in context of technical writing, let us call a learner as an audience or a user, right? Now, the first question arises, why is it important for us to understand the user or the learner? Okay, so let me give you a generic example. Okay, here's a picture on the screen. Let me know if you notice something about this picture. Please unmute to answer if you can. Or, okay, you can use your chat as well. Yes, Divya. Journaling. Okay. Anybody else? Writing. If putting down the points, yes, that's right. So if there is writing, do you see that it's happening with a different hand? It's happening with a left hand. Now, did you know that left-handed people are 6 times more prone to accidents than the right-handed people while using gadgets or tools? Any guesses why? Let me break the suspense. Because most of these tools or gadgets are not tested for left-handed people. Yes, that's correct, Pooja. These devices are mainly tested for right-handed people. That corner case is completely missed. Now, those kind of learner disasters or user disasters or corner cases are totally ignored. And do you think that's the right thing to be done? No. And that is why we need to have an audience analysis. We need to understand our audience. Let's take another generic example. What do you think this guy is doing? Take a close look and then I'll try and see who's writing what. What do you think is happening here? Is he some astronaut in training? What is it? Is he testing a chair? Okay, keep them coming. What else do you think this guy was doing? Do you want me to show you the picture again? Or did you guys get a chance to see it well enough? Ready for a space journey? Well, could be the kind of suits that this guy is actually wearing. Experiencing VR, yes, with the kind of glasses that this guy has. Testing protective gear, ready for skydiving. Yes, pretty adventurous activities that possibly this guy is getting into, right? Well, the reality is that he's wearing an age simulation suit. Do you know what an age simulation suit is? Well, the suit has, if you see, hearing loss inducing headphones. He's basically wearing a suit which is geared towards understanding how a product um, can be tested for senior citizens or the elderly. So he's wearing glasses which enable him to see a blurred vision. He is wearing weight on his legs so that it's difficult for him to walk. He also has a neck brace, if you realize. So basically, a suit which will increase empathy in building design of whatever product is meant for an audience which is a senior citizen. Well, I think a classic case, and it's from a personal experience, is the experience of using earphones. If you know somebody who not earphones, hearing aids, sorry. So if you know somebody personally who uses hearing aids, what is the challenge um, you think uh, is most often faced with hearing aids? And hearing aids, especially for the elderly. The challenge that I have seen, number one, that the user manual for hearing aids typically is written in small font. It is so small that the person for whom it is meant cannot read it. Why? Because they are in that age bracket where they can hardly see. They're already getting visual impairment. Two, they have started reducing the size of the hearing aids. Now, a small sized hearing aid might fit into your ear well and not be visible to somebody else. But the fact that the elderly people cannot see it, they cannot even fit it in. So, probably user analysis in such cases needs to be done a level deeper. It's about digging deeper. They already do it, like all of us. I'm sure most of us will, you will agree that we do our user analysis. We do an audience analysis. And we have sections in the preface which talk about intended audiences, right? But the idea or the intention of this session is to dig one level deeper. What happens if you dig one level deeper? As uh, you you become deliberate about your behavior, right? That is when you do when you dig deeper into the next level of user analysis. You also get inspired to make some choices, and then you take actions. You become or you present information which is relevant to the user. You present to them what they need to know rather than what they want to know. The classic example is from Steve Jobs' interview, or not an interview, it's a conversation I think they had at a Mac retreat way back in the year 1982. I just happened to read it 2 days ago, that somebody from the marketing team walked up to Steve Jobs and said that we need to do a market research to understand what the end user needs or wants. And Steve Jobs stood up and said, no, the user will not know what they want. We will have to do that work. And this is the reason why I share these slides with you. So these products might be generic examples, but what I wanted to establish here is that the need to know our user. And having said that, you can extrapolate it to our instructional design, to our tech writing fields also. How? Consider one example was considering the manuals which come with hearing aids, right? Somebody like us writes those manuals. So ensure that you know who your user is. If there are people who are elderly, who are senior citizens, they cannot read small font. Another example could be uh, if some of you uh, are designing manuals for board games for kids. Uh, how many of us have kids here? And how many of us sit down to read the instructions from the manuals to our kids? I'm sure almost all of us. Well, if there are those games, yeah, Priyanka, that's right. So if there are games that are meant for children, let the instructions also be in a format which are meant for children. The other day, we were talking about and we were having a session on climate change. Now, climate change is such a heavyweight subject and it's too new and it's difficult to digest. So, the content that was presented was equally heavy. And the thought that occurred to us was, what if it was presented in a comic strip? Wouldn't it be easy to understand, easy to digest? So those are the kinds of analysis we need to get into when we are designing some written material, some instruction, or providing content to our user. Now, what happens is, as technical writers, when we sit down to meet our everyday work styles, how do you guys usually get your work requirements? Do you get them in the form of functional specs or features or demos? How do you get it? Just one or two examples would be great. Anybody? Come on, we get work every couple of months. Demos, okay. Functional specs, yes. And in the sessions earlier, they were talking about getting the high level designs, correct? So these are the kinds of documents that we get. What's the first thing that we do when we get these documents? We start building relevance. We start identifying the need, isn't it? What do we do next? We start to ask the SMEs some questions, the subject matter experts, probably the development team, right? What do we do? What do we source from those SMEs? Examples, use cases. What else? Gaps that we think there are in the instructions, probably, which means we start structuring the content, right? So in that rut of getting demos, functional specs, or any other technical documents from our development teams or our um into our hands, what we do is we start building relevance. Okay, we start looking at structuring content, we start chunking content, we try to fit in examples, we try to get SMEs to fill probably gaps, we try and get source frequently asked questions. Um, and then we have our style guides to adhere to. We start writing, we take care of editing, we do peer reviews. And in all that, what does the end product look like? The end product talks about, or the end guide talks about the product, not the user. And that is what I want to drive in. So the focus of our documents, we document or we create every other day, ends up focusing on the product and not on the user. So then the question arises, how to analyze your user needs. What is it that we should ask? Well, this is where instructional design comes to our rescue or help. Instructional design talks about a detailed needs analysis, okay, where the primary analysis that you do is for identifying the users. What are the kinds of questions that we ask or we can ask? Okay. Well, we can start by asking what is the entry level of the user? Okay, is he a potential user, somebody who's exploring the product? Is he a new user, somebody who's getting started with the product? Is he an intermediate user, someone who has used the product before and probably is expecting a newer feature? Is somebody an experienced user who's well versed with the product? Is he a new professional, somebody is new to the field, but probably, or who's an experienced person in the field, but new to the product? Okay. Or an experienced professional, or he's a developer, admin, new contributor, or an experienced contributor. Whose is? Let's start getting down to the gory details of identifying or profiling our users. Okay. The next question we can ask is, what is the delivery mode? Laptops, mobile, hard copies. Have you realized in hard copies, we used to have indexes. We don't have them anymore, right? What do you hope the user achieves by reading your document? That should be your next question. Okay. Is it that the user needs to solve a problem? Is it that he needs to perform a task? Does he need to answer a simple question, make a decision, learn something new, identify some constraints? What are the likely questions the users can have? What does the user need to know to understand the topic? Does he need to be given a context or a background? Does he need to know some prerequisites or some limitations? Does he need to set up instructions, source examples, detailed or write down detailed procedures, have some reference material ready, plug in some conceptual information, give some explanations, do some deep dives, list down some facts and figures, do some performance comparison between the old and the new, give some visuals, diagrams, format using tables, or list down some frequently asked questions. What is it that will help the user understand the topic? What tasks does the user perform? The questions for us will be, can you break the tasks into smaller components? What are the failure points where they'll make mistakes? Which ones are critical? Which ones of the tasks are critical? How does each task fit into the bigger picture or the bigger scheme of things? What is the flow? What are the prerequisites or limitations that either limit the user to perform a particular task or he should be mindful of? So these are the kind of questions that we should put forth to understand our user before we sit down to build relevance of the product or start structuring content. If we bring in this ID intervention before we start writing a document, I think we'll be more aligned to what is required as an outcome. That is the point that I want to bring in here. Let me bring your focus to instructional design back. So there are three tenets of instructional design, okay, or three pillars, if you want to call them. They're audience, content, and outcome. When you work on any two of them, the third automatically happens. So in this case, if we work and make sure that we understand the audience and we know what the outcome is required by the audience, we can scope the content. How can we do that? Well, we are already doing that at workplaces, but this is how it'll help. So when we talk about understanding the user's entry level, we can sit down to design the tone of the language, isn't it? Or take the user from what he knows, which is his familiar area, right, to the unfamiliar or to the new area. That is what the user's entry level will do to you. If we talk about the delivery mode, we should be mindful of the format, right? Indexes was one case. What if your feature just needs a mere video to convey a change in the feature? Or if you're talking about games, hard printed, um, printed or hard copy printouts in user manuals or uh, game boards, right? So what is the delivery mode? If you know that, that'll help you identify how do you want to deliver the content. What do you hope the user achieves by reading your document? So when we talk about that, is it that you want to create a troubleshooting guide because you're helping them solve a problem? Or you want to give them some quick tips, probably in videos, or some reference material, maybe API documentation? Or is it is it that you need to give them some marketing collateral? So when you sit down to understand that what is it that the user should achieve by reading your document, you're able to identify which document can you create or will be best suited for the user. What are the likely questions users can have? This is an easy giveaway for all of you. Are frequently asked questions, isn't it? Or cheat sheets. Can we give them cheat sheets? Or is it possible for us to create some quick reference job aids, which will be good enough for them? And lastly, what does the user need to know to understand the topic? Well, this is the meat of it, right? This is where you will sit down to design the content. You will put it into a structure, and that is another level of ID intervention where we talk about what or how to create objectives for each of those topics so that we never go astray. So with that, we come to the end of our session. I hope that I was able to motivate you to probably get into a level deeper of user analysis, which is one of the strongest arms of instructional design. You have to sit down to analyze your audience. And if you start doing it intentionally, it'll eventually get into habit. This is what I heard the other day. I was watching Rocket Boys, and Vikram Sarabhai was trying to speak with his team, and he was telling them that the first time you do something, it looks like magic. And every time after, it becomes a habit. So my intention or my giveaway to each of you from this session is that make the user analysis an intentional activity. Bring it before you start working on your documents. With that, the floor is open to questions and any feedback. More than happy.
What a great session indeed. Thanks, Deepti, for bringing this in. It really helped to understand the user flow and how instructional design can help us understand about the
Thank
user.
you.
Yeah. So, any questions, please, you can unmute and ask.
I think I even saw a question scroll up. Okay.
Hey, hi, this is Anirban.
Hi, Anirban.
Yeah, thank you. It was a really nice session. Can you tell about what are the like tools that use for instruction design? Can you say about the tools that we use to create the the instruction design content?
So, like I said, Anirban, instructional design is a field of study. It's an approach, it's a methodology. We can apply concepts from instructional design to create instruction using different tools. So, in my role as an instructional designer at NIIT, we create web-based training. We created training for software, for hardware products. We even delivered instruction in PPTs. So tools could be any. Even your PDF format could be a tool, right? Um, Instructional design doesn't uh, restrict you to using a tool. But having said that, if you're talking about using, so what, okay, let me put it this way. When we talk about imparting instruction, okay, the tool could be anything. It's the principle or the methodology that you will use. So if we take a school or a classroom session, for example, in the past, teachers have been giving instructions by studying themselves, right? They used to use their whiteboards or soft, whatever, blackboards to impart instruction. Nowadays, those very teachers use videos to aid instruction. What are they doing? They're using instructional design, but they're using different tools.
Okay.
Do I come close to answering your question, or was it
Yeah, yeah.
different?
Means, yeah, this is nice. It's close, but yeah, means what my intention to ask the question
Hmm.
is, means what are the tools or popular tools used to create, instruction design content? Yeah, yeah. Like for example, in technical writing, like Matcap Player or Adobe FrameMaker. These are the tools we usually use, or MS Word. So, like that, any tools? That's good.
No, no, Anirban, I wouldn't say that there are any tools for instructional design. What I'll say is that you can use different tools to create effective instruction. Okay, so you can use a PPT to create an instructional module on climate change. You could use PPT or your PowerPoint to create effective instruction to talk about a new game. I used PPT. Somebody else could use Canva or templates from Canva, right, to create a presentation. So there are different tools. So instructional design is not okay, so if we talk about technical writing, let me try and draw a parallel for you. So when you talk about tech writing tools, um, try and use, let me see, how do I answer this? So, okay, so technical writers need to know tools like probably Oxygen, XML, and all those things, and MATLAB Flair, right? That is what you're saying. So instructional designers need to know tools like Microsoft Office suite of products, or there are custom built engines, or there are learning management systems where you can create learning courses. And there are other suite of products in the market which will help you design courses, and they have all right, yes, you're right, so they have built in the instructional design principles into their tools. Okay, so they'll have placeholders for writing your objectives. They will have placeholders for creating topics, subtopics. They will have placeholders for creating assessments. So those are instructional design interventions that those tools can do for you. I won't have the names handy, but yes, we can connect and I can direct you to them, or I can direct you to people who would be using them.
Sure, sure. Yeah, that will be great. Thank you.
Sure.
Usually, this is Ranjit. So, as I said, I worked as an IT for 2 years. So,
Yes.
in our organization, I was working for K-12, which is one of the topmost online schools in the US. So, they had their own learning management system.
Right.
So, our job was to, put the transfer the content from the legacy LMS to the new one they had created. And in the new one, they already had fixed fields for assessments
Yeah,
and
that's
for
exactly what.
objectives.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so learning
I think,
objectives and all.
yes. Thank you for reaffirming what I just shared, Ranjit.
Yeah.
I'd not worked with the, yeah, in the ID area for a long time now, so I had missed out on uh,
You write
knowing or
your
remembering
content in the in Word, or will
in
you
Word.
directly
Yeah,
write
any
in your
tool. Hmm.
content in the tool and just save it? That is all, it gets put up online.
Yeah, so it is built. It has built-in placeholders for all instructional design elements
Yes,
or
there is back
principles.
end and there is front end, and there is
Yes.
another total three types of works: back end, front end, and resources. So I was working on the front end. There's an my colleague is checking the back end, and then there is another person who's checking the resources for the same chapters. Resources in by resources I mean there are keywords in those
Hmm.
chapters,
Hmm.
and there are another like documents that a reader can use, refer
Yeah,
to,
yeah, yeah. In
appendices
fact,
and all.
yeah, you reminded me of this client that we were working for at an IIT, and they had their own engine. It was called a skill builder, and they had their own engine. So that engine had a placeholder for graphics, it had placeholder for content, and we could not write
Mhm.
more than 50 or 60 words of
Exactly.
content in a single frame. And then after every 7 to 8 frames, they had a frame for a quiz. So now, why was there a quiz? Because instructional design wants you to test if the user has learned the concepts which were taught in the last 6 frames, because this is the seventh frame, right? So there are engines that are built around it. And what you'll also notice is that in instructional design teams will have production teams, separate production teams who are working on this area, where they're working to create either custom engines, or they're doing what Ranjitman just mentioned about uploading and looking at how these things are taken care of in a learning management system.
And also, if you guys have done any course on Udemy,
Hmm.
it's a very good example. They have learning objectives, they have summary section, graphic section and all.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, even in my previous organization, I was working in NIT Technologies Limited. So I was
Hmm.
selected on the basis because that was my first job as a technical writer. I came from the ID and content background, and they selected me on the basis that we need somebody who is aware of technical writing principles, because we need a technical writer who can write learning objectives, create assessments, and all. So it's basically rounds up to user analysis and meeting learning requirements of the end user.
That's true. And thanks for bringing that up, Ranjit. Actually, the other day I was having a conversation with a senior colleague at work. And while I always believe that instructional design overlaps with technical writing in more
Yes.
areas than once, they were of the opinion that they are supplementary to each other, or they're rather complementary to each other. And in either respect, I think it holds true. The idea is that if we can, as technical writers, imbibe the best practices that are done in instructional design into our tech writing, I think we'll be able to create effective documents for our end users. Because many a times we face challenges where either the user does not end up reading our documents, or there are massive jiras raised for us and corrections and all those things. Why? Because they're not, or and in such scenarios the users tend to reach out to either directly the development teams or their customer contacts. So the documents are never even read through. So that is the gap we need to fill by sharing what, by understanding what the user at the end of the day needs. If we can supply that information, I think we've done it. Fortunately, at Synopsys, my one of my first projects, when we were doing and user analysis to
Oh,
me. Yes.
I'm so
Time
sorry,
check.
Deepti. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Sorry to interrupt. We are short on time.
Yes.
So can we take this discussion like after Gaurav's session, so that people
Absolutely.
who really wants to like engage in this topic and really want to discuss anything, we can do that. Thank you so much, dear.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
everybody, for tuning
Thank you,
in. Thank you.
Deepti.
Thank
Thank
you.